through which he would say a few words. People would prepare quantities of bread that could sustain him for several months. He did not allow anyone to enter his cell. Whoever came to him stood outside and listened to his advice. Then one day he emerged from the fort with the help of some villagers who had to break down the door. By this time, they expected him to have wasted away or to have gone insane in his solitary confinement. Instead, he emerged healthy, serene, and enlightened. Everyone was amazed that he had been through these trials and emerged spiritually rejuvenated. He was hailed as a hero, and from this time forward, the legend of Anthony began to spread. In the midst of new persecutions against Christians in the Roman Empire, Anthony wished to become a martyr, and in the year 311, he went to Alexandria. He visited those who were imprisoned for the sake of Christ and comforted them. When the governor saw that he was professing his Christianity publicly, not caring what might happen to him, he ordered Anthony never to show up again in the city. At the end of the persecutions, Anthony returned to his old Roman fort. By this time, many more had heard about his sanctity, and he had many more visitors than before. He saw these visitors as interfering with his prayer, so he went further into the desert. He traveled for 3 days before reaching a small oasis with a spring and some palm trees, and chose to settle there. Disciples still found him out, and his number of visitors continued to grow. Anthony may properly be called the father of monasticism because he organized some disciples into a loose religious community and inspired similar withdrawn communities throughout Egypt. When St. Anthony felt the day of his death was approaching, he instructed his followers to bury his body in an unmarked, secret grave. Yet his remains were reportedly discovered in 361 and transferred to Alexandria, Egypt. Sometime later, they were taken from Alexandria to Constantinople. Anthony is credited with assisting in a number of miraculous healings, primarily for those suffering from infectious diseases, particularly skin diseases. Over time, the various sayings of Anthony were spread in a Greek translation. He himself wrote letters in the Coptic language, 7 of which still exist. His biography was written by St. Athanasius, entitled The Life of St. Anthony the Great. Many stories are also told about him in various collections of sayings of the Desert Fathers. Though Anthony himself never organized or created a formal monastery, a community grew around him based on his example of living an ascetic and isolated life. The ascetic life is characterized by abstinence from worldly pleasures, often for the purpose of pursuing spiritual goals. Anthony remains one of the more mysterious but honored fathers of the desert. Most of us would never think about living a solitary life isolated from the comforts of contemporary society. Yet there are men and women called by God to embrace the ascetic lifestyle. Through their simple lives of prayer, they offer support for the church in the midst of temptations and distractions. Like St. Francis of Assisi, who was born almost 1,000 years later, St. Anthony took the teachings of Jesus literally and gave up the comforts of the world in exchange for a closer relationship